You are watching KTN Sunrise Live. Now for that long-awaited discussion, we are talking about the role of the First Lady, Margaret Kenyatta. I should remember to keep saying is the First Lady in waiting. Well, tomorrow by around 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. thereabouts, she will be officially the First Lady you know, of course, wife to the fourth president. We haven't had too many precedents that have been set. Like I keep saying, she's in a very unique position with her mother-in-law, who was the First Lady. Hopefully some advice that's needed there. But immediately she came out, everybody said, oh, should she dye her hair? Should she wear more African and, you know, have the head wraps and whatnot? But today we're going to take a look at it beyond that, beyond the dressing, but what she can do and what power she would be able to have in the country at the moment and going forward. So that is our question of the day today. Again, let's remind you that what role do you think the new First Lady should play in the country? Send us your comments on Twitter at KTN Kenya. You can tweet me at Yvonne Okwara, and you can also send us an SMS. 8040 is our SMS number. There you go, all the details on your screen now. So keep your comments coming in. I've seen some, and thank you, Charles, for also reminding us to be gender sensitive. Someday in the future it might be the first gentleman, but we'll be getting to your tweets in just a moment. But to discuss this with me today, it's an all-ladies affair. We are indeed talking about the First Lady as it is. So Lorna Irungu and Tazim Elkington join me today on Sunrise Live.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Good to have you both. So let's also remember that one day in the future it could be the first gentleman.
Always.
Okay, yes. All right, so we just keep our eyes on that one. Well, let's just talk about this. The first time you know, she came out, I think it was even during the campaigns, and sadly for me, the first thing that came out was her appearance. Is it something she has to get used to? You know how they say when you're in the public eye, when you're in the limelight, people will sometimes feel free to comment on just about anything, from your appearance to the way you speak to, you know, how you dress. Let's start with you, Lorna. What are some of the lessons she's having to learn about being in the public eye?
Well, I think for me, one of the things about her is she's been thrust into this light. Her husband has clearly said that he wants her and has shown that he wants her by his side. She's not a campaigner. I don't think I've actually heard her speak or at a rally or something. And even before she was there, I mean, we've always known she's been around. She's not one of those who suddenly appeared. She's been with him and she's been pictured with him. But for me, the thing that strikes me the most is at the last rally just before the elections, that big Saturday rally, when she would not even take the microphone.
Exactly.
When he was like, here, you know, here,
and
say something, and she wouldn't speak. And I think that gives us an idea of the kind of First Lady she's going to be. I don't think she's going to be the loud, in-your-face kind of person. I think she prefers to take a slightly back seat and not to be the person speaking out of things, but she is still going to wield a tremendous amount of influence. And I think the first time we've seen with this is by him asking her to hold the Bible.
Right.
So and he said the reason is he wants her to hold him to account. So by doing that, just by default, even if she never wanted to speak, she is now accountable to us, the people.
Indeed.
And people are going to look at her for guidance and for situations.
Indeed. A woman in the public eye, how difficult is that? Bearing in mind that for a lot of us, and maybe it's this whole celebrity thing we're driven by, that the first thing we do look at, especially with ladies, is the look. I don't think anybody ever said, oh, well, I don't like how Uhuru Kenyatta wears his hair, or how, you know, William Ruto wears that suit. But for women who are thrust into the limelight in a position like this, the first thing is always their appearance. How do you handle this whole attention and sort of direct it in the way in which, you know, she would like it to go? Taz?
I think personally for me, people ought to be allowed to do what they want. And as much as she will be setting trends in whatever she chooses to do, I think for how she prefers to dress and how she wants to wear her hair, these are all very personal attributes that we must allow people to keep as their identity. I don't think she's going to fall into this fashionable trend where, you know, she's going to set the new style that's going to be on billboards next. So I think we've got to allow her that and respect that as well.
It's usually not fair, is it, for women as opposed to men who are in a position like this?
I think it's also because you're not necessarily seen as an official person. You're seen as to complement, to be there, to support. And the only thing that you're there is first visual.
Okay.
Okay, you don't
So she's-
have
right.
and I think, to be fair, is that it goes across. It doesn't just go to the first lady. It goes across to any woman who presents herself in a specific way.
Okay, all
The
right.
first thing we look at is how you're presented, and what is it that you stand for. Kind of like, you know, image matters. Image is the first thing. One of those things.
Okay.
And I think it's not fair. You may say it's not fair, but it's the way the world is.
Okay.
And I tend to not pick battles on things that, you know, you've lost that battle before you even started. So
Yes.
the question is,
Right.
is what she's saying, should she just, you know, decide this is who I am?
Okay.
I own this.
Right.
And this is what I'm going to present.
And the rest of us will
And
therefore
yes.
then learn to accept it.
Yes, because
Yeah.
I think even when people talk about her hair, there were negative, but there were also extremely positive comments. I think that she looks stunning. I think having gray hair like she does and wearing it like she does, she looks absolutely stunning. And that for me is, what about all those people who kind of feel insecure? You can twist it. You can start a
Right.
whole new conversation.
Right.
Why do I have to dye my hair? Why do I have to present myself in a particular way? So I think that's not going to be the thing that we're going to remember her for. I think that she's going to actually build something.
Okay, and let's talk about some of those things that now she's expected to do, some of the values. I think we've discussed with you, Tazim, on various occasions about values, and we've been trying to sort of put this in the limelight, albeit at a different platform from where we are today, but we can carry on that conversation. Do you think that, you know, the First Lady could be the one that says these are the values we should, you know, espouse as a Kenyan, you know, population? Could this be the moment for when we would see values taking center stage with the First Lady?
I think that will be a very important part of her role. The fact that, you know, I was looking at the constitutional values. You know, we're talking about patriotism, we're talking about national unity, rule of law, integrity, accountability, transparency, equity, sustainable development. Now, if we look at all that in terms of her position, you know, integrity jumps out, and accountability and transparency right to the top of the list for me. And we know for a fact that we haven't actually had a defined value system in this country. Now's the time that, you know, it will be very important how she lives and how she portrays who she is, what she gets involved with, and how she holds her husband accountable. Because that is a huge part of the whole constitutional value system. And we need to start creating a value system. That's where we're actually starting from scratch. And she will be a big part if she is playing an outward role.
Okay. And what would that be? You mentioned it's an outward role, and if we're saying these are the values, what does she need to do then that then says, okay, there's integrity, there's accountability? In what way would she be able to drive these values?
Okay, so, you know, integrity has become the cheapest word on the streets at the moment. It actually shocks me how people throw that word around meaninglessly. And actually, when you break it down, what it actually means, it means that you translate your thoughts and words into action. So how she behaves is what is going to then literally ground integrity into the system. So action speaks louder than words.
Right.
Yeah, we've had words, I mean, you know, free words.
Yeah.
We've been a nation that's lived with unkept promises. I think everybody now has to be accountable to actioning and actually showing us specific outcomes on what they speak. And it doesn't just reflect this. This doesn't go just to the First Lady. I think it goes across the board, that this new government has to be accountable and transparent. And so I think for the First Lady, this is going to be a big test.
So everything that she says and does should therefore be aligned with integrity, meaning if she makes promises, if she decides to take on certain issues that she may find close to her heart, what she says and what she does
Has to be aligned.
has to be aligned. Lorna, what do you think about, and I think we were talking about this earlier with Martin Mutua, about whether we should institutionalize this office, maybe put in a legal framework surrounding it. What do you think of that? Should we make it much more formal than it is? Because right now it's a bit...
I think, first for me, when I look at what First Ladies do and what their power is, and this is across the world, is that they actually have two things. They have convening power and they have influence. You have influence over the executive because you're there. You have convening power because by virtue of your office, you can bring people, ideas, or spaces together. And when you look at those two, and if we just look at this distinctively and say, this is what it is, and then look at what first ladies across the world have done, you've seen those with influence and those with convening power. And those with convening power have held meetings and said, this is my agenda, this is what I'm going to do, have brought together stakeholders from different people. And probably that's one of the most powerful things Hillary Clinton did when she was first lady. And that's what allowed her to really earn that space that she earned. And when we come back closer to home and look at Africa in terms of influence and convening power, First Lady of Uganda has used that pretty well, of Sierra Leone, of Zambia. They've actually, the First Lady of Sierra Leone and if I'm not wrong, Nigeria and Zambia have addressed the General Assembly at the UN on issues that they're dealing with. Ban Ki-moon is running a program to get, safe motherhood, of which he's engaged first ladies just because by virtue of their office, it's a gender-based thing. So when we look at some of the trends that are there, in that we are the office of the first lady is actually an official office. You have access to.
She does get funded.
You get funded.
She has handlers.
There
she
you
has
go.
PAs.
Yes. So it's an office.
Okay.
It's just because we've not used it as much doesn't mean it isn't. And we've had a succession. And let's look at it. When Mama Ngena was in office, she was not as vocal either. But there was a lot of other things. So there's Mama Ngena's children's home. There are things he did in terms of values. That's where her values was to work in that space. We then had a gap of 24 years where we had no official space. So in terms of that, a lot of that kind of got lost in it. Come 2002, and we had Lucy Kibaki in, the current First Lady. And from early on, it was, when people were like, what is she going to do? Where is she going to be involved in? She clearly chose, she liked the idea of the choirs and that whole music institution. And for me, when you talk about being involved in something that you're linked to, I still remember this image of her at an official function, getting up and really dancing. And so for me, they were like, oh, but there's a choir. I'm like, she enjoys it. It's her prerogative. It's what you said. It's her prerogative. So she supported that. Mama Lucy's, the hospital.
Yes,
she supported that too. Well. When I think of her, I think family values. The times she was extremely vocal, she was like, "Don't mess with my family." And so you knew what position she was. Now, how that was played out is something else, but she stood for something. And when I think of the current First Lady, I don't see her being loud in your face at public functions kind of thing. I think if you were to take the two things that the office holds, which is influence and the ability to bring people together, she would wield influence. I think she's going to be more a behind the scenes kind of person. We're probably not going to have her giving huge statements, but she could do that. She could be the one who's, here. What are we discussing? Why are you not doing this? How do I hold you into account in this? And given that she also has young children, when I say young, I mean they're not in their 30s and 40s. They're still a pretty young family, if I'm not wrong. How Kenneth turned 21 the other day. So
they're all below 30.
They're all below. Let's actually go below 25. Kind of just starting off. And for me, I'd be like, what are the issues that she's most probably going to be dealing with as a family that could be a societal issue? So are we talking about drugs, alcohol abuse? What are the things that teenage what are the challenges young people are facing, or young children are facing? Not young children, I guess, young adults that she could relate to, that the country could relate to. But I actually, just from her persona, I would hate to be the one thinking that, oh, she's going to be, suddenly do a 360 and is going to be the one mentioning, doing interviews. No, I think she's going to be later.
All right. Let's talk about the accountability of that. And I know you're huge on integrity and being accountable. Now, she's not an elected official. How would we be able to judge her success? With our members of National Assembly, with her husband, who's the president, we can always go to him and say, excuse me, Mr. President, I put you in there to take care of this, that, and the other for me, and I don't think you're doing that. How would she be accountable to the people for what her office has done and what she's able to achieve?
I think we don't know enough about her. I think we got to be very, very clear. We actually know nothing about her.
Right.
So I think, first of all, she needs to really get into introducing herself to the people. So whatever we say now will be speculation, which is not going to help anybody. But if she introduces herself and starts to get the public to know her, she might even surprise us greatly. So once we get to know where she's operating from, and what she wants to get involved with and what she wants to excel in as her role, then we can start questioning where she's going with it. I think at this stage, how do we hold her accountable? How do we hold anybody accountable? I think it boils down to that, doesn't it? How do we hold anyone accountable based on what promises they make? And I think I think as Kenyans, we've come such a long way. I think we've realized that words are not enough for us anymore, that we want quantifiable outcomes from whoever states whatever they state. And I think as a people, we are not going to let people get away with anything. I don't think we will. So I think as we move forward, if we have another discussion in about 6 months,
hopefully when
we'll have a clearer,
more
clearer picture.
Okay.
Okay.
And I think something I'd like to see happen is, because we've really worked as a team. One of the things about this new government is coming as a team, and I think it was last week, and the Standard reported this, is that the deputy president's wife, Rachel, convened people, took a group of women from her area, took them over to Nyeri, I think it was, to see about farming and everything, and poultry farming, and talking about empowerment and how it helps. Because she's like, every single woman has a few chickens, but this is how you can actually make a living from it. But instead of just making it a small group, she took different groups of people and took them over there. There is convening power. There is someone who is clearly, you can start seeing the direction that she wants to take, because there was no reason for that to be, you know, in that kind of space. And so I think I agree with her. People need to start introducing themselves. There's been a lot of focus on, you know, getting people into power and not quite understanding what everything's going to be. There's a lot of changes that are happening. I also think that these two women, the First Lady and the Deputy President's wife, are going to hold a space, or have the opportunity to really hold a special place in Kenyans' hearts right now, because of the challenges that has outlined in our constitution about our value systems, and that because we need to see who else is keeping this men accountable, and it's a woman behind it. And we've seen Ruto attend services with his wife, and we've seen him, we've seen her being very from there. We've now seen what President-elect Uhuru is doing, and saying, you know, I want her to hold the Bible. So I think by default, they are being introduced in positions that kind of lead to what it is they're expected to do moving forward. Because this is the first time we're having a wife hold the Bible for you. And he was very clear as to why he wants this done. And so I think from a point of us, telling us is, he's already said, I expect her to keep me accountable. So for me, she's not made a statement, but it has been made on her behalf. That I expect, I'm doing this and doing it publicly together, so that she holds me accountable. And then it goes back to, what are we going to hold her accountable for? Because you can't hold her then accountable for the entire National Assembly, which has its own speaker, the entire Senate. So I think for me, my question is, and I think the question as a people we're going to be asking, and maybe 6 months you start asking, is, what is she holding him accountable to? What power? And it goes back to then understanding, what is his actual power? And how much of that can she then influence, because he has said, this is what I want to happen.
And we're talking about, you know, ladies influencing the men, you know, the cliche statement that behind every strong man, there's an even stronger woman. And we've seen certain influences, if we're to take some comparisons. For example, Michelle would not allow Barack Obama to run before he quit smoking. That was the one thing. She said, you want to run for president, I will support you all the way, but first you've got to quit smoking.
Absolutely.
And just taking a look at that influence that this woman has over this man, let's take a look at that influence she would take to the public. Do you think we would get to a position where a lot of the things that she would engage in, a lot of the activities, a lot of the causes that she would use, could actually help her husband in his political career? Tasm, do you think there could be that correlation, or would the two be separate?
Well, it depends again what she chooses. If she chooses that she's going to support causes that he has a soft spot for as well, then it becomes a joint venture. If she creates her own causes, then it'll be the direction she chooses to take. However, I think that position dictates, literally dictates, whether we like it or not, that whatever she supports is at a level where it is accepted by society. So it's a dicey situation to be in. And I mean, you know, being First Lady, great, it's a great place to be in. It's got all the cameras on you and all that stuff. But I mean, depending on what her character and personality is, it's not an easy position to be in, because you're constantly in the limelight and you have to prove that you deserve that space. And that's apart from the fact that you have all your family responsibilities. You know, being a wife and being a mother is already a full-time job, right? And then you have all this other stuff. So personally for me, I think like I said earlier, we've got to watch that space and see what she's going to get up to, what decision she's going to make on where she wants to go with this, and what kind of sphere she's going to surround herself with. That's going to also have an influence on what she does.
Right, indeed. Taking a look at that, that's important about the people who will surround her and therefore frame her image.
And I think also for me, it goes back to the fact that she's starting, can I say, with an open slate? She can do whatever it is she needs to do at this office. She's going to be judged on the basis of what she does. That's one. And two, I also think, in terms of just what you're saying, that it's in the spotlight. I think one of the things about First Lady's office in Kenya is that it's not as much in the spotlight as it would be in the US, for example, or somewhere else. Is that here we're a lot more, we're not as hard on the spouses. In fact, if you're not there, it's not
such
huge.
a big
It's
deal.
not exactly. We're not going to be like, really? You don't have it, and it goes back to our values. Okay,
and which is what, we've talked about. In the US, family values are topmost. A man has got to be able to prove that he can take care of his family before he can even commit to looking after an entire population of a country. Could this then be the next thing?
Well, you know, my mind's just working as we were talking about the last point. You know, we've got to look at the fact that this is not a space that we have really had being filled in. So she's actually coming into really big shoes, where, based on the fact that, you know, we're in the 21st century, this is now the way things are working. And we're looking at models, who are our models, and who has set the precedents. And if we look at Michelle Obama, and we look at, you know, various first ladies in African countries, this is something that's becoming more trendy now. So she's coming into big shoes where, and she's a tiny, cute little person, you know. So she's coming into this space where she's going to have to prove herself. And I think the more support she has, the better it'll be. And I think she will hold our president-elect accountable, because I think she's going to surprise us. I think she's really going to surprise us. I think underneath that shyness, there is a very strong woman that's going to come out and surprise us all.
Okay.
I would do that.
Taking a look at some of the causes, of course, everybody that's weighing in on this discussion is talking about what she should take up as the causes, you know, over the next 5 years. Drug and substance abuse, I believe, is what one of the tweets said, and I'll get to that in just a moment. Gitonga George, well, okay, I won't even get into that tweet. But then, you know, there's also the fact that apparently, and like we said, we don't know very much about her, but there's also certain causes like who is a typical Kenyan. And case in point would be the fact that, you know, they say she's of mixed heritage. Okay, could that be something? And I know Tazim, we'll get to Tazim because this is so relevant.
That is Tazim's territory right
this is
there.
So let's start with you. Is this something you think she might want to do that? Because Gitonga George, thank you for your tweet. And Mary said she should help Kenya improve ties with Germany. That's her motherland. But it's just in terms of defining who is Kenyan. There's been issues about that. Forget the fact that we have issues with the 42 sort of indigenous tribes. We can't even accept each other. But then there's a lot of other people who are Kenyan, not necessarily black, but still feel like they're on the outside. Do you think this is something then that, you know, the First Lady would say, she's as Kenyan as it gets?
Well, there you go.
Right,
I hope someone in her sphere is listening to this, because I think it's really, really important that we get beyond the tribalism, we get beyond all these racial, tribal, religious separation, And that would be a great cause for creating a Kenyan identity that has nothing to do with color, race, tribe, religion. And if we're to move forward as a country, I think we really need to have that. We really need to have that unity. I mean, isn't that one of our values?
Yeah.
National unity,
Peace, love, and unity.
patriotism.
Remember that, yes.
I say I'm more Kenyan than it's ever going to get when I'm describing myself. And people look at me and say, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And I said, it means that I'm as Kenyan as it gets, right? And so, and I say that also because I've been questioned and pushed against the wall, and I've had people say to me, what makes you think you have a right to talk on behalf of all Kenyans? Well, sorry buddies, I do. I'm not talking on behalf, however, I am talking as a complete Kenyan.
Okay.
So I think yes, I think it's, if that was one of her causes, that would be great. The other one, and I've got to get this in as we're talking about it, is the fact that there's been so much focus only on the girl child that I think it's time now for us to have a focus on kids without specifying gender. And I think the boy child is being ignored. So for a woman to stand up for the boy child would be a change.
And that just, you took the question right out of my mouth. There are some of these cliche roles that we expected to play. Nothing wrong with them, and it's very important. Absolutely important to keep talking about the issues that the girl child faces, that women face at whatever levels, right from childhood all the way up till their adulthood in the corporate boardrooms, whatever it is. But are there just some cliches that we just,
well, I know,
will be tiring to hear again and again? Maybe something different?
I think part of the things about cliches is also it falls into what are the issues being looked at across the world. So if you look at OFLA, which is the Organization of African First Ladies, their core focus is actually HIV. And when you look at the continent and you see what are the things that cross borders, cross the region, will get international attention, will help get resources in, HIV is top there. About right to protection of what are the issues global. So health is a huge thing, and HIV then comes on top of health, then followed by things like malaria. Part of our challenge, as she said, about being in the 21st century is, and being a developing country, and then being at the stage where we are in our constitution. There's a lot of things we are dealing with. We are dealing with basic needs. We are dealing with aspirational needs. We are then dealing with economics. And part of the challenge of leadership is, it's a wicked problem. There is no clear-cut solution. You stand up and say, development is infrastructure. Okay, but as we're spending this much time in infrastructure, what are we doing with schools? What are we doing with health? And part of the thing about being then in an office like that is the issue of unity, which is amazing now when you put it and frame it, is great. But is it the issue that the grassroots woman who's looking at her as a mother expects her to deal with? Does that make sense? So when is it going to be something that resonates, not just in the city, but resonates with that woman in the village who's looking at her? And I think that's why sometimes we get stuck with the so-called cliches. Because I mean, if we say, what are the issues, and I'm going to go to women, but not necessarily education. If I say, what are the key issues? Maternal health. If we say we're going to stop maternal health, and that's a cause she's going to take on, not that she's pregnant or have the delivery or will have any of the challenges other people are facing, but she's in a unique position to really say, and I would go back to looking, what are the promises that Jubilee Manifesto made? What are the things she can actually hold her husband accountable for that he said? And for me, the thing that stood out there was that they're going to have the women, which is a promise that was made 10 years ago in 2002. You're never going to be detained in a hospital while giving birth. And it's still happening. And it's still happening. So, and I think that's where the complexities of this issue come to place. And part of the reason why I also feel sometimes our first ladies shy away from being heavily involved in those things, because then it becomes personal. Then it becomes, you. But if you're talking about holding accountable for promises, and I'd say look at the manifesto. What are the issues there? If we're talking about education, is it going to be the laptop per child that you're then like, is this what it is? Is it going to be maternal health? Because it's there. It's not just a nice thing, it's an issue that all Kenyans are grappling with, but also she has to be part of a community. When we talk about the people she surrounds herself with, is the issue of maternal health one that can become a regional issue? is it one that East African First Ladies can rally around? Is it one that African First Ladies? Because you see, there are organizations and that allow you to just not get your funding from your country,
Yes,
but then
but
what is happening internationally. And so I think there's a bit of research to be done, given that this new position we have is we are digital, we're going regional, we are taking Kenya to the next level, and that even whatever causes need to go there.
Okay. You mentioned the Organization of African First Ladies. That's had some successes. They've been to the UN, they've been to the States, I believe even recently, just, you know, trying to get funding for that. But they've also had some controversy, for example, you know, about how much money they're spending, you know, when they're going out.
Absolutely.
They have entourages when they go, you know, they carry their hairstylists. These are occupational hazards perhaps for women, maybe, that many people would not understand. You know, we need to get our hair done properly.
African hair is, I'm sorry, African hair is difficult to manage if you're in a country where no one has a clue of what to do.
It is. And the weather doesn't help either.
Well, thank God she doesn't need one.
She doesn't need one.
Yes, that was already one off.
So I think we should continue to champion the fact that she keeps her hair the way it is. It is cheaper for the taxpayer. Yes, there we go. But you know, they also faced quite a bit of controversy. They're trying to open up a peace mission, which is to be headquartered in Abuja, and the funding. Who will, you know, put up the buildings? Where will that money come from? And then again, the question that comes in for every Kenyan who's already heavily taxed by everything that's happening in the government. And then there's the question, and it may be legitimate to some, that why are we paying for this office, yet it is not an electable office? We voted in her husband as the president, and that's where the buck stops, including in the fact that how we'll hold them accountable. With the president, we know where we can go. We can go to the National Assembly. If all else fails, we can say, fine, we're not happy with the president, we can impeach him, we can go to the Senate. But it's sort of not the same, is it, with this role that's not defined but is still equally funded? I mean, if she needs to travel, you know, outside of the country, and she does it on official business, saying, I'm going to find opportunities for women farmers who are in the country, and let's say what happens internationally, and get better prices for their commodities or whatever, she will be funded. And yet being accountable then to me that funds that office, you know,
is hazy.
Yeah.
So what is the accountability model that's going to be put in place?
Right.
Yes, that's a big question, and I think that's a question that we must ask publicly as she starts setting her place in society. I think we should be asking those questions, and I think her focus. You see the other thing is, you know, when you're part of a bigger group and, you know, the rah-rah around it, I think there's enough issues in Kenya for us to deal with before she goes to that step, and I'm sure she'll realize that. So, but I think we've got to really ask, how are you going to be accountable to us as Kenyans?
And I think that one continues, and I think that one, once, as Tazim very eloquently put out, is that once we've figured out what it is she wants to do, what are the things she wants to be involved with, you know, how are we going to go about that? Because I also think we've just not been we've not been very keen to figure out how much, what's the budget for that office?
Yes.
Who knows?
Right.
I couldn't find it. I actually don't know.
Yeah.
I know we say there's a cost, but
we don't
I
know.
couldn't find an actual budget
Exactly.
for it to say, oh, okay, your office is funded to 3 million shillings. What can you do? You get what I mean? So I haven't seen that. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure that information exists. I just was not privy to it.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult for me to hold you to account if I don't even know what it is.
How much?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, you know, we complain about MPs because you're like, we know what you're getting.
Right.
We want to see direct correlated
Right.
results. But this, I'm not sure what it is.
Okay. This will be a bit of a tricky one. Okay, let's get into our closing remarks now on the First Lady, the influence that she would have, you know, in this country. There is some that still say, well, her role, and I'll get you that tweet in a moment, that her role ends with the swearing in. Do you believe that? Do you, you know, should there be more to it? And this is in the event, by the way, that we will have a first gentleman. So we've talked about that before. We are hoping so. For America, it's looking likely, you know, maybe if Hillary Clinton goes for it next time, you know, you could have, you know, a case of reversed roles now. But, you know, just taking a look at that, there's some roles, for example, that Michelle Obama plays in terms of fashion in the economy, and I think that's been brought up here. The dress that she wears, the designer that she wears, the Jason Woos of this world who've had their careers made because she picked, you know, one of their outfits. You know, is this one of those? Should we see her, you know, picking one boy Mukenyi dress and a, you know, a Kiko Romeo outfit, and that says, oh, you know, wow, and everybody goes rushing there? What sort of influence do you think she can wield, one, with the public, and also two, with her husband? Because, you know, like we say, any relationship is very personal. None of us will really understand the dynamics of that. Whether she indeed does have great influence on her husband, president-elect, or not, very, very few of us can tell, you know, looking in from the outside. So let's just talk about her influence in the country and her influence with the president-elect.
Personally, for me, I think it goes back to the role she chooses to play and how she shows who she is. And if she comes out as a person that can be trusted and that is someone who is really who she is, if she comes out as a real person, she will have great influence on the Kenyan people, because where we are at, I think we're all hungry for real people. We're hungry for someone who's going to give us what we really hear. And so I think as a people, we're hungry to have someone who's real. So if she is real, and she proves that she is real, not just shows us, but proves she's real, then I think she'll have great influence on the Kenyan people. Then whether it's trends or styles or whatever, she will set precedents to a certain degree. I mean, you know, they're the what we call them, style buffs, and there are all the different types of buffs, you know. They're the people that you see as soon as they see a billboard, the next thing they're going into stores to buy that same stuff. So there are those who are followers, and they will follow. And there are those who will retain their originality and individuality. But I think majority, we're all hungry to have real people. So that's the influence she'll have on people. When it comes to her husband, he's a tough guy. Let's not cut that at all. He's a tough guy. He's come a long way. What is his character like? And how do they interpret each other, and what sort of relationship they have? I really don't know. But what Lorna said earlier, that by default, she is going to have to hold him accountable based on the fact that she's going to be holding the Bible tomorrow. If she has been appointed to hold him accountable, then we have the right to hold her and him accountable. Both of them.
That's what she said.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better. Lorna?
I think for me it goes back to the two things I said, her office and what it means. She has influence and she has convening power. Those are the two things that first ladies have. And in terms of influence, I think over her husband, we will only know based on what we are told. So we will only know based on the fact that if she comes out and says, I am holding him accountable for this, then you know. If she doesn't say anything, then I'm sorry, we don't know. He's the one who stood up and said, I'm asking her to hold me accountable. So maybe the information may not come from her, it may come from him on decisions he makes, and he may credit her with them. Because if he had not asked her to hold the Bible, I don't think people would actually, and that's part of the conversation of it. So I think in terms of influence over the executive, and let's get this right. We're not talking about her as Margaret Kenyatta. We're talking about her as First Lady. So her influence is over the executive, not just him as Uhuru. That's their two personal spaces are still their two personals. Husband, father, not in question. When he asked her to hold the Bible, he says, as the executive, I have. So these are two official positions, her title and the title. So the question is influence over the executive, and that for me comes to policies or things or decisions or stands he will make as the president. So that's for the influence of which you will only know if he says it and gives her credit for it, or if she says it and says, I'm holding it. So that's two. In terms of convening power, which is really what I think is the opportunities that lie open for her, is not necessarily to influence decisions, because as we're saying, she's not elected, she's not this. All she can do is say, this is a direction, this is a personal thing, and that's convening. And I think I would really like to see her do something based on issues that we are grappling with, A, as a nation, and also probably B, for women, mothers, in going back to first lady position, office that comes because she's a mother, because she's a wife, and that automatically lends itself in.
Right.
In terms of fashion, goes back to what our values are. I don't think we are that value. We are that society that is
Like
going
Jasmine
to...
said, there are some buffs and there
There are others who
will
are
just
not, yes,
continue,
but I
yeah.
don't think we're the people who see somebody on television. We are not those starstruck people who line up outside and, you know, get autographs of people unless it's an occasion or stuff. So would she have as much influence in fashion or things like that like Michelle Obama? I hardly doubt it. I think as a country, as a nation, our priority, we kind of will talk, but we're not, she's not going to move an industry. I don't necessarily think we're going to see a trend of people, suddenly someone make millions because she decided to wear a particular outfit or not. And also, I think those are things you earn from the beginning. Those are things that you position yourselves to do, which that conversation of what will Michelle wear started during campaigns. That by the time it was a build up to it. So for us, we're like, we campaign in t-shirts half the time. You know, we're about colors. We're not really about this. You say something, you don't. We're not. That's not our societal value. And I think in terms of anything else, it will be in just how much she's actually thrust into the public eye in a position.
Indeed. Thank you both, ladies, for joining us this morning. Been speaking to Lorna Irungu and Tazim Elkington on the roles of the First Lady and just what it is she needs to do. Keep your thoughts coming in, by the way. We will continue to sample your thoughts and your views. I think the most important things that we've picked up is that she's got to be real and she's got to be herself. And only in doing that, and if people can relate to that she's being real and she's being honest, then and only then can she wield that influence.